All right, welcome back. We've been able to reestablish connection with Bola Adeeko, who is the head shared services division of the NSC. The side effects of technology, especially here in Nigeria, where, data is just up and down. Welcome to you, Mr. Adeeko. If you see me right now, good morning from Abuja. Hi, it's Lagos.
Good morning, Nancy, and to your viewers as well. Apologies, we're having the technical glitches here. Lagos is good. I hope the same goes for you in Abuja as well.
Yes, we are, we are just trying to keep up. And I know you're doing the same too. So let's just go straight to our conversation. We've been hit by this pandemic at least since February, since the first case came in. And the stock exchange just, kicked in. I've been following what you all have been doing there. Speak to me about how this pandemic has affected the way that the Nigerian Stock Exchange has done business, at least in the last 2 months or thereabout.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I think it's important to start off first by expressing our well wishes to the founder of AIT, who recently was reported as testing positive for COVID-19, and as well as his families. We pray that for full recovery and speedy recovery for all of them. It's important to note that this pandemic that we're dealing with has two dimensions. Obviously, the first one being, first and foremost, it's a health crisis. And then secondly, the socioeconomic impact of it also has been felt all over the world. For us at the exchange, our reaction to this pandemic actually, I would almost say, started years ago, which is that we've always set that foundation in place to allow for a very strong business resiliency, where we have pretty much zero tolerance and threshold for downtime as far as market access. And so, ahead of the index case actually being reported in Nigeria, which I believe was on the 27th of February, we had actually started to discuss internally how we would deal with the aftermath of when that case arrives. And so immediately on the 23rd of March, we activated a remote first protocol, which for us meant that for 97% of our employees, because obviously they're the most important stakeholders for us in this case, from a health and safety perspective, were moved offline. So everyone was asked to work from home. For our brokers, who for many years now they've been able to trade remotely, what we did was to shut down all of our trading floors, which for anyone who's been to the exchange, we do have events here where we use the floor to support such. So we shut that down, as well as the other ones at the 5 other locations outside of Lagos, to make sure that we reduce the risk of further contagion. So I think for us, the journey started years ago because we've invested heavily in ensuring that those tools and processes would always be in place. Obviously, no one could predict COVID-19 in any shape or form hitting us in 2020. But I think doing that groundwork years ago has helped tremendously in ensuring that the market remains open. So for those that want to raise capital, and also for those that want access to liquidity, that there's no interruption to that process.
Exchange, of course, have moved even beyond what is happening right now in terms of remote trading, in terms of doing a lot of things digitally. Speak to me also about what some of the activities during this pandemic. There is the digital closing gong, because even before the pandemic, every 2:30 p.m., so to speak, that's when the market closed. There is the beating of the gong, to indicate we are opening, we are also closing. So now you have a digital closing gong, and also the successful deployment of remote trading. So we've seen some of this. Are there other things that we need to see in the near to mid to long term in terms of digital innovations?
Yes, I believe the examples that you cited are just one of several that we've had in the past 5 weeks. It almost seems like an eternity now. So Our paradigm right now, in terms of the way we believe we will continue to engage with our stakeholders, is remote first. We understand that there will be instances where the need to have physical presence certainly has to be accommodated. But the examples that you showed just helps to debunk some of the myths that I think for many, many years we've always had about how everything always has to be done in person. As another example, the one that you cited, as far as digital goes, which Sterling Bank actually was the one that debuted that, and we hope to have more of those. We've also engaged our stakeholders. So normally we have a quarterly briefing with the CEOs of issuing houses and dealing member firms, which typically we convene all in person here at the exchange headquarters. What we've done in the last 2 weeks is actually to conduct that virtually. So imagine over 200 people patching into a conference call that goes almost about 2 hours. Obviously, with a bit of teething pain here and there because of the nuances of Nigeria, we'll continue to refine that. So I think for us, strategically, the point I made earlier on about how we've always believed that technology, specifically digital technology, is the way to go going forward. This is giving us an opportunity to affirm that, and we expect to invest more. Lastly, about 2 years ago, we established an enterprise innovation hub, which is intended to make sure that we participate in actively when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution. And so partnering with fintech companies, maybe in some cases investing in some of them, and maybe using ideas from them to help improve how we interact with our stakeholders, I think are some of those things that certainly the market should look forward to as far as things from the exchange.
You know, it's worthy of note, especially to see the kind of developments that the Nigerian Stock Exchange has undertaken in the last few years. I remember I used to be on the ninth floor of the stock exchange where you are right now, many years ago, like 13 years ago, thereabouts. Looking at stock market analysis, stock market prices and all of that. So I've keenly followed what the exchange has done, at least over the years. That brings me right now to some of the efforts that the Nigerian Stock Exchange is also making as we are battling. It's a double whammy crisis, like you said. It's a health crisis, also an economic crisis. Speak to me about some of the efforts that the Nigerian Stock Exchange, as well as other capital market stakeholders, are taking at this time to fight COVID-19 pandemic. Just like we're seeing the Apex Bank, which is the Central Bank of Nigeria, with some other private sector players. So speak to me about what you all are doing there.
Yeah, so obviously, I think on the back of my earlier comment about the immediate focus for us was to ensure preservation of life. We've since had an opportunity to now figure out how we can actually make more of an extended impact with all the effort that's going on to not only come up with treatment of those that have been infected, but also to reduce further spread. And so there's been a lot of effort both on the public and private side. I think you mentioned COVID, which is led by CBN. And on the SEC side, a similar thing has been the case where they've taken lead in galvanizing the capital market community to look for ways to address, so come up with support to make sure that we reduce the spread. For us at the exchange, what we've decided to do is to do it in two dimensions. So we will participate in what the SEC is leading. And as the CEO of the exchange announced last week, there's 100 million naira that we will be donating. 60 million of that will go to this SEC-led capital market support initiative, which will go towards several things like ambulances and other types of medical equipment. For us at the exchange, what we've decided to do with the 40 million is to use it in two parts. The first part is to ensure that we provide the anchor contribution for Mass for All, and that's what we're calling Mass for All for Nigeria, all Nigerians.
Okay.
Given the recent announcement by the government that for people to leave their homes, that they need to wear masks, we've decided that we want to play a role in that, and we want to provide non-medical mask, which will be based on production that's done here in Nigeria. We have a couple of vendors that we've already engaged. And this would be done, obviously, also making sure that we abide by the SON and NAFDAC regulation as far as the guidelines for producing this. The idea is that if you look at the country where we have about 200 million people, it will be good to have every single person have at least two. So this mask will be reusable, and that with the work that we'll be starting off with, we'll hopefully be able to galvanize other members in the community, obviously, to do similar things. So this mask for all starts off with 100,000, and this 100,000 will go to all the affected areas, focusing on the most vulnerable. And the expectation is that the other private institutions will join us in this campaign. The second part of this campaign will go towards create more social awareness. The social awareness would be to ensure that people know the benefits of using this mask, and then also make sure that they're using it properly. We've dedicated a website where we have all this information that people can go to understand how they can donate. And the idea is that as we get more corporates to participate, we'll be able to reach that 400 million target.
That's commendable. Mask for all, especially at this time that the lockdown has been eased. We have to go out of our homes to conduct our businesses. You know, some minimally, but we need to wear masks to protect us from further spread of the virus. Now, we look at some other initiatives or some other protocols we need to abide by. Social distancing, physical distancing. How is the stock exchange going to go about that, you know? Bearing in mind that you also have some events and all of that. How do you go about that at this point? Physical distancing, because even before what you're doing right now, at the floor of the stock exchange, you see a lot of stockbrokers, you know, sit close to each other. Now it's no longer there. So how do you, you know, also incorporate some of the things that you are doing right now, abiding by the physical and social distancing protocol?
So thanks for that question. I think the first thing to acknowledge again is that we will not reopen our facilities until we make sure that all the proper safeguards are in place. So the guidelines with respect to the distance that folks have to maintain between themselves, whether in workstations that our employees sit at, or for some of these events, public space that you've mentioned before. Here at the exchange, we do a lot of events, as you rightfully noted. And if at any point we reopen the business, we need to make sure that we maintain those safe distancing. I mentioned earlier on that I think there's also a paradigm shift that we expected to also adhere to, which is that if you look back to some of the things that we've done in the past, where the default has always been that you get people together in the cluster of a room, we've tested it out. So this past few weeks, some of those examples that I've given you, where hundreds of people have been able to participate very effectively in things that otherwise would have done in person, has made us understand that we actually can do these things differently in a way that it's using digital platform, which is readily available out there. So I think for us, we're not at the point where we feel as though there would never be any instance where we have congregation of people, but we certainly have to follow the health guidelines and make sure we use all the digital tools that are available to us to engage with all of our stakeholders, both internally as well as externally.
I'm just wondering, and this should be the final question. I'm just wondering, you know, a lot of facts behind the figures, events, you know, when companies come to the exchange to present their reports, end of year, audited results and statements. So what would happen now? That's a follow-up to what you just said.
Yeah, I think the same question was asked maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago that the digital closing down, which I think as you noted, is always done with people congregating at the exchange. What would it look like if you did it digitally? So we tested that out. While that was the first time, the belief is that we, working with all the folks that certainly will both participating, have to explore how we can do that digitally. So again, is there a way we can have a Zoom session, just as an example, because there are other solutions out there, where you achieve the same thing, have 100 people that participate in that same closing down session. There are events that we do that are market-wide, that ordinarily we would have asked people to drive and fly in from all over the place to attend. there's no reason why we cannot do that remotely. It saves cost. And by the way, being a sustainable exchange ourselves, it also helps to reduce pollution, because every time people are flying around and driving from one end of the city or the country to come attend events, we continue to increase the carbon footprint. So I mean, there's more to come on this. I think, as I stated, we generally continue to look at all the different things that we do to ensure that we take good lessons from all the great things that we've seen happen in the past few weeks, as well as good lessons. And for other areas that we need to improve, ensure that I think our first default position should always be remote first, whether we internally engaging or we engage externally. So more to come.
More to come, and we'll all be waiting to see. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope to speak to you, or to engage more with you all at the exchange in coming weeks and in coming months. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy, for the time this morning.
Yeah. Okay, that's the much we can take. I've been speaking with Bola Adeeko, who is the head Shared Services Division at the Nigerian Stock Exchange.